Hi guys, my name's Seb Tudor, I'm the man on the Silver Mountain and welcome back. Now today I wanted to talk about something that I talked about a long time ago, and that's limiting beliefs. Before I talked about kind of what they were and some of the worst ones that you could come across in one extent or another. But beginning of this year, lots of people making New Year's resolutions and planning out their whole next year and all that kind of thing. And so as a result, the people I'm talking to, the people that I'm just around, they are throwing out all kinds of comments and limiting beliefs that really don't do anyone any favors. And I would go so far as to call these kind of toxic because they build up and build up and build up, and then once they get to a certain point, you're just going to start crumbling. You're not going to survive very long. The same with any toxin; it builds up in your system and then it starts killing you. You could take a little bit, but as it develops, as it goes, then it can override things and can cause you to break. So if I'm looking down at times during this video, I apologise, but my notes are down here in front of me today because of some of the reference materials I'm using. But this is where I kind of want to just go through and highlight a handful of these limiting beliefs that I have heard kind of time and time again over the last 2 weeks since the beginning of, or before that, since Christmas at times. And so it's some of these might touch a little close to home, but ideally, if this sounds like you, if it sounds like something you're saying, then maybe it'll give you a moment of pause just to go, why am I actually saying this? So the first one that I've heard a lot, and I've heard it from people in corporate work, in study, in kind of just anything and everything really. And it's people going, once I've achieved insert thing here, I'll be happy. And in some cases, it's a throwaway line like, "Oh, well, once I've done this, then I'll be happy and I can put it away and I can leave it." Fair dues. But people who go, "Oh, well, what I need to do is reach for this thing, and once I've managed to attain this thing, that might be way off, might be like end of the year kind of goals here that they're trying to set." But they're going, "Oh, well, I'm going to reach, and I'm going to reach, and only if I actually manage to grab hold of it will I be happy." You're putting your dependence, your happiness rather, it becomes dependent on something that may very well be incredibly hard to attain or possibly even completely unattainable. And as a result, there needs to be that separation, I feel. And this is one of the things that that I've raised with people before. We can't allow our happiness, our emotional state, the positivity in life, and all that kind of thing, to be dependent on others, to be dependent on things, to be dependent on happenings. It has to be us and us kind of maintaining that positivity and focusing on the moment. I can take a kind of positive, happy feeling away from getting this video done, from going, yes, okay, tick, right, that's another action I've taken towards having a productive day. Yeah, I've got one of my things done, that's it. In which case I could take the happiness away from it, but my happiness isn't dependent on it. If I hadn't managed to do this video today for you guys, then may very well have been a bit put out by it. I had this thing that I wanted to do, didn't get to do it, but then I'm not saddened by it. I'm not necessarily angered or frustrated by it. It's just a thing that's like, oh, well, I would have liked to do it, but now I can't. And yet, leaving the focus on the goal and attaching the happiness to it, it takes you out of the moment. We've talked about living in the moment before. People call it mindfulness. I don't like the word mindfulness. It's a very airy fairy word, and it allows for a lot of interpretation. But living in the moment, focusing on what you can do now to affect now and then cascade into later, you know, that's the important thing. And so going, oh well, I once I've done this I'll be happy, puts everything too far in the future. If you're saying, oh well, I'd like to, you know, once I've hit 5,000 words, then I'll be happy and I can leave it, I'll go through, edit it, and that'll be it, done, then fine. You know, that's you more expressing the level of contentment for your finish line. But it, in case of people who are actually reaching, you know, once I've finished this course at work and I've got the promotion, then I'll be happy. That'll allow me that feeling to really make me happy. I bet you anything, no, it won't. Firstly, and secondly, what happens if you don't get the promotion? You have built it up to the extent in your mind that your happiness has become dependent on it. It doesn't happen, you become miserable. You know, it's like having the carpet pulled out from under you and you go toppling over. You have further to fall if you've actually been stood on the carpet anyway. Otherwise, if you just watch the carpet go, then the person who's doing it's a bit of a dick because they pulled the carpet, but that hasn't affected you. The next thing that I want to kind of touch on is that I've heard from a lot of people, and this is surprising to me considering kind of what I heard last year and what I heard the year before in regards to kind of new year rolling round and people talking about their resolutions and the things that they were hopeful for the next year and all that kind of thing. This year people seem to be so much more depressed. Or maybe it's just because me and those around me are all of a kind of similar age to one degree or another. You know, I'm hitting 30 this year. I'm seeing people that my girlfriends are at uni with kind of progressing again further and further towards the end of their time at uni, and they don't necessarily enjoy that prospect. You've got people who are disillusioned with the way the country works, or, you know, whatever else. And yet the number of people who have come to me and been like, well, it's too late for me to change. You know, it's like you're 20, you're 27, you're 25. How's it too late for you to change? You've been around for like a quarter of your potential lifetime. How is it too late to change now? It genuinely kind of boggles my mind, but it's that limit that they put in front of themselves. It's that belief that they internalize, and it's like saying, when you can't remember something, it's like saying, oh fuck, I can't remember, when actually if you go, oh well, it'll come back to me, then there's a good chance it'll come back to you. Self-suggestion, kind of also auto-suggestive. And so if you go, oh, I can't change, it's too late for me to change, then you're not going to change, because it's not that you're unable, it's not that you're lacking in the potential to do so, it's the fact that you've just literally resigned yourself from doing so. You know, it's a fairly simple thing when someone goes, oh well, I've already achieved this, that and the other, and now I'm set in my ways and I'm too kind of old to change, or it's too late for me to change now. It's like, if you're on your deathbed in your late 90s or something, your legs don't work, your brain is shutting down, your internal organs are shutting down, and then you say this, then I'd probably be like, yeah, do you know what, you're probably right, you've got a couple of hours left to live, I'm not going to argue with you. At any other point though, if you are functional, if you have your cognitive abilities, if you have your health, then it is never too late to change, the same way it is never too late to learn. It might be of varying difficulties depending on age, depending on depending on your situation, but ultimately it is never too late to go and do these things. It will never be too late to go and do these things until you are no more. And so, you know, we've got this collection of people though now that I've been hearing from to one extent or another, be it friends, be it people that I'm buzzing around, family, random people that I've gotten into conversations with on the street or whatever else, many of which who are, like I'm 30. I wouldn't necessarily say that I'm old, or at least I'm coming up on 30. I wouldn't necessarily say that I'm old. And yet, I've got people younger than me by nearly 10 years in some instances, turning around to me and going, "Oh, it's too late for me to change. Just can't do it." It's like, well, hold on. I've changed. From the time that I was your age to the time now, I have gone through at least 2 or 3 iterations of myself. In which case, I'm living proof that what you're saying is bollocks. So, simply put, every single opportunity that you have to learn, to advance, to make constructive change, or purposeful change, because change without a purpose just leads to chaos, and chaos is a damaging thing, or at least it can be for the most part. The world is ever changing. You are ever changing. Embrace that, and don't force yourself from some odd perception to stagnate. Because if you do that, then you're not going to do yourself any favours at all, in any way, shape, or form, ever. And so that's one of these beliefs that people will take on, they'll internalise, they'll go, "Oh, well, I've been doing this for so long, I can't change the way I'm doing it now. Oh, I've been a crotchety old bastard for the best part of 70 years. I can't change now." Yes, you can. Just need to, it might take you more to kind of reprogram yourself, but we learn new habits in between like 30 and 60 days, 2 months. Yeah? So if you need to change, if a change needs to be the thing that happens, then it doesn't take a vast amount of time to get through it. If you need to change your diet, if you need to change your medication that you're on, the schedule that you're running, the things that you're doing, the people that you're arranging things with, the way that you're acting around people, the way that you're interacting with your work, or any of these things, then simply put, you can do it. You just need to want to, and you just need to not resign yourself from it by going, "It's too late for me to change." Literally just you quitting for the sake of quitting at that point. Nothing that was ever worth doing was easy. And so as a result, don't expect it to be. Don't just resign yourself. Don't just allow yourself to make this as an excuse. Unless, as said, one caveat, if you're on your deathbed, and granted young people can die too, but regardless, if you're on your deathbed and you literally have a finite expiry date, then I'll put my hands up and I'll leave you alone. I'll hope that you have a restful last few hours, but otherwise, don't do this. Especially when you're younger than me. If you're older than me, then fine, you can try and make the argument. I'll still kind of pick your argument to pieces and break the limiting belief down with you. But if you're definitely younger than me, then quite frankly, you've got no excuse. So the next thing that I want to mention is that there are so many people that chase perfection. Has to be perfect. Has to be exactly this way. Has to be exactly what they envision. And if it's not, then they get upset, they fall to pieces, even if it's a very good approximation of what they first perceived. They then, it's that attachment to their ideal. And we're going to be touching on this a couple of times this week, but it's the attachment to the ideal that then causes them to become out of sorts. There's a few various places I've talked about perfection before, and how it's unrealistic, and how you were very much here to be just a functional organism. You weren't here to be perfect. If you were here to be perfect, then there would be no point in evolution, in continual growth, in reproduction, or anything like that, because you would be perfect. You'd be pristine, you'd be ideal, and that would firstly become boring if everyone managed to get to that point, but also kind of no one is perfect. And that's what makes variety a thing. It makes some people stronger, some people weaker. It causes that connection between individuals. It allows for that kind of growth between individuals, because one person will be better at something than another person, and yet that other person will still be better than the first at a thing. And it allows for a collaboration to make a greater of the two. And so, don't get stuck on perfection. As I've said before, time and time again, don't worry about perfection. Worry about it being functional. Worry about it being kind of ideally, which again probably not a word I should use, but have it fill the requirement. That's all you need to do. If you're spending, if the pass mark is a C on something that's fairly inconsequential, then do the minimum amount to get the C, to get the grade, because no one's ever going to ask you about it again afterwards. If the entry requirements for the university you want to go to are an A, an A, and a B, then put in the work to get there. But if you only need an A, an A, and a B, you don't have to worry about getting an A, an A, and an A. You just need to make sure that you do the minimum requirement, get within those lines, tick those boxes, and be on your way. Because again, once you've moved beyond that point, no one's going to ask you for those qualifications. They're going to go, do you have this level of qualification? And you will go yes or no. At which point they will go, terrific. Now you can come and work for us. Now you can come and do this task for us. And there won't be they won't ask what your specific grades were. And there's nothing, if you start gloating about how great your grades were, the best chance is that they're going to think you're some kind of overblown, self-important asshole, and they're going to dump you. You get to a certain point, and even degree, master degree, PhD, all of those kind of things, it becomes a case of, do you have it or don't you have it? And half the time it doesn't even become a case of that. There have been people that I've worked for who have worked under me as well, who have had all manner of different qualifications, some of them incredibly expensive, and yet they have still ended up working in a retail store serving people over a counter. They've still ended up going into an office job that has ultimately very few prospects for them, but it's all that they could realistically get because of their area of specialization was so niche that there just wasn't any need for them. And so as a result, the overall qualities that they had, those qualifications, to a degree amounted to a lot of wasted money and time, even if they felt enriched by it afterwards. So that them chasing that kind of level of perfection when they were overachieving, when they were doing so much more, only actually really left them at a detriment. And it's unfortunate that I don't necessarily feel that is the way the world should work, but it is the way that it does, at least for the time being. And so that's the way that we need to work around that. But even stepping away from that as an example, going in and going, well, it needs to be perfect, needs to be 100% perfect, will still usually just mean you waste time, you waste resources, you waste manpower on things that were perfectly fine as soon as they began to function, as soon as they began to work for you. Going and making an absolutely perfect arrangement from which to sell something, a perfect website that is optimal in every way, good chance that it actually achieved its peak a long time before that, when it started gaining traction, when it started to pick things up, when it started to work for people, and it drew in the audience to the site. All of those other optimizations, all of those other perfect little tweaks and things like that probably didn't do you any significant favors, or it may even have streamlined things to the extent that people no longer wanted to come to your site, for instance. There's functional, and then there's perfect. Aim for functional. And if you find yourself aiming for perfection, judge whether or not it's actually worth the cost of getting there. Because also, as I've said before, people aren't perfect. You're not perfect. You can't expect perfection from anyone or anything else. And so, as a result, probably not the wisest thing to get hung up on. Because even when you think that you are reaching perfection, you're not going to be there. As said, perfection isn't realistic. If you're looking for a perfect measurement, then it is always going to be slightly out. If you're looking for the perfect set of clothing, then it is always going to, as your body changes, be a little bit out. If you are looking for the perfect man or perfect woman, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but they plainly don't exist. Learn to enjoy the imperfections of another individual and appreciate the things that they bring to your life, rather than just looking for someone that ticks all your boxes, because they're not, again, going to exist. Not in all the ways that you think they should. But anyway, the next couple are kind of more internal. And the first one I want to touch on is that the number of times the anything negative that happens to a person, they instantly blame it on some kind of conspiracy. Oh, they just want to screw me over. And as someone who has been on the receiving end of people actively trying to screw them over and ruin their career, put them back, put them in their place, and so on and so forth, it's not, even then, it's not always a real personal attack. Especially one instance that jumps into my mind was when I ultimately knew my job. I had done very well in my job, and I refused to back down against the site manager for the place. And what it kind of came round to was me arguing my point, resigning, and then showing that I was the bigger man by giving more time for me to more notice time to make sure that my role was filled, to make sure that my team didn't suffer, because I gave two shits about the team, unlike the site manager. And it was a case of this individual wanted me in my place, wanted to put me down, wanted to hold me back in certain instances, wanted to continually, passively aggressively and actually aggressively make a point that I wasn't as capable or as powerful or as whatever else as him, when I demonstrated that I was time and time and time again, even taking over parts of his role at times, simply because I was there so often. And yet I don't, looking back on it especially when I've done my various reviews and of myself, my various analyses to help make sure that I'm on track with what I want now. When I look back, I go, do you know what? I think it was more about him, that entire thing. It wasn't personal against me. I might have been targeted, but I was targeted because I was highlighting his failures. I was highlighting that he wasn't everything that he thought he was. Again, he was aiming for that perfection. He was aiming for that once I have attained this level of status and this level of control, then I will be happy. And I was something that stood very, very obviously, considering I was a good head taller than he was as well. Whenever I walked in, I was hard to miss. And I stood there as a glaring, shining example, or bearded example, of how he was not doing well within that environment. How he was not just quite there to where he wanted to be. And so looking back on that, I feel like that's a case of he was coming at me because, even though I was very specifically targeted, he was coming at me because I just demonstrated that he wasn't everything he wanted to be. And that is possibly one of the most personal attacks I've ever had in an environment. But a lot of the time, that when it's something completely different, something not turning up in the mail, something not arriving on time for you, something not being processed properly, a website going down or crashing or breaking, or a game breaking, or something else that's just gone wrong, they're obstacles. There might be a person behind them, but people aren't perfect, and there's a good chance that you were singled out by random happenstance rather than by malice, by focus, by them being aware of even your real existence. And so, when it comes to being attacked, if someone is coming at you a lot, again and again and again, harassment, things like that, then an actual harassment, we've talked about that before, then it may very well be a personal attack, especially if they are using things that are very personally tailored to you, things from your background, your the way you look, the way you sound, the way you do things, that you can't necessarily control as well. If that's what they're coming at you with, then there's a good chance that yes, it's personal. If it's just bluster, if it's just noise, if it's just things in your way, if it's people in your way, then there's a good chance that you're not the target and it's just happening. Learn to roll with the punches. Learn to roll with the punches. But learn to roll with the punches. Learn to realise that it's not just an attack on you, because that way, when you just go, well, do you know what? This stuff happens. I might be in the middle of it this time, but it'll be someone else next week. It'll be someone else tomorrow. I'm just got unlucky today. Then you can brush yourself off, keep moving, see the obstacle for all that it is, an obstacle, and if it's not a malicious entity and it's just an obstacle, it's just a wall to climb over or dig under or get through, then it's not going to kind of block you. You're not going to be anticipating other actions. You're not going to be preoccupied with trying to outthink the random object in your path. You're just going to look at getting past it. It allows you to keep your eyes on the prize, and that's kind of important. And another thing, last thing, that allows us to keep our eyes on the prize is there are going to be times when you feel bad. Negative emotions, anger, sadness, shame, hopelessness. All of these things strike someone, whenever. Just that empty null feeling where you're kind of feeling neutral. You're not really feeling anything, but the fact that you're not feeling anything when maybe you should be, or you feel you should be, starts pulling you down. Everyone gets to all these negative points, but there's a reason we feel them, and negative emotions aren't bad. I did a video a long while ago. Unfortunately, it was one of the videos where I was still having audio issues and things like that, because I feel it's a very pointed message that made a big difference to me once I learned it. So maybe I'll redo that video at some point or expand on it. But anger, especially for me, is a very powerful tool. It's a driving force. It's an energy that I can then apply to things. When I get pissed off with things, when I get upset, when I get annoyed, then my brain works faster, my body works better. I attack the thing that is in my way until it is no longer in my way, and I can stride over it triumphant. Same with things like fear and sadness. They are indications that something isn't wrong. They are alarm bells, they are warning bells, but they aren't things for you to kind of shrug off or bottle up or whatever else. The best way to get through it is to accept it. If you bottle it up and stick it on a shelf, then the bottle's not going anywhere, and imagine how bad it's going to be when it gets knocked off the shelf, smashes and goes everywhere. It'll be a mess, right? So the best thing that you can do is take it on board, ingest whatever you would have otherwise put in that bottle, and it's going to enrich you and come out, and anything that's just not going to be useful to you or going to really be helpful to you, well, let's just say shit happens in this ingestion analogy that I've somehow concocted. And so don't fight against it, because again, it's coming from you. The only person that you're fighting against when you're feeling a negative emotion is you. You can choose what you feel. It can be hard, but you can choose what you feel. And if you're trying to run away from it, trying to fight against it, you're fighting the one opponent you can't ever be free of, because it's you, and you go wherever you go. It becomes a kind of game of chasing your own tail, but whenever you bite your tail, obviously you're going to feel the pain, and whenever you're kind of giving chase, then you're frustrated that you've not caught up with it. Exactly the same kind of thing happens when you end up trying to resist, trying to shrug off, trying to bottle up and ignore negative emotions. Take them on board. Find out what they're trying to teach you. If it's fear, what are you fearful of? What's causing your alarm bells to go off? If it's sadness, then what's causing it? What is causing that sadness to the extent that it's really affecting you? Is it something that you can remedy? Is it something to indicate a lack of health? Is it something to indicate a lack of connection? Is it something that you can't help, in which case why are you wasting energy worrying and being upset about it? You know, if it's beyond your control, then yeah, you can be sad, yeah, you can make a point, you can talk about it, you can expand on it, but there still has to be a point at which you don't waste the energy anymore. And then in regards to kind of other more extreme things like anxiety, like genuine anxiety and stuff like that, then again, one of the only things that you can really do to overall continue to move forward with it is embrace that it's a part of you and learn either ways to cope with it, ways to work around it, things to kind of tackle with it, or seeking help to that end as well. It becomes a case of acknowledgement and management rather than a case of trying to ignore and work past. And so that's the last point that I want to touch on today, guys, because the negative emotions thing, there are so many people who feel negative emotions and then they either throw them out into the world because if they're feeling that way, so does everyone else, so should everyone else, and if they don't, then they're terrible people. Or they bottle it up, stick it on a shelf, and it just becomes self-destructive. If people were more honest with themselves and more willing to embrace the parts of themselves that they don't necessarily like, then they would probably see an overall better turnout of things than when they try and prevent themselves from feeling or from doing so. But anyway, guys, thank you very much for watching. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on some of these. Are there any that you would add to this list? And otherwise, thank you very much, and I'll see you in the video tomorrow. Take care. Thank you very much for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this video or found it interesting, then please drop us a like, share this video, and subscribe for more. And I'll see you in the video tomorrow. Take care.